All right, folks. Well, if we're doing our job right, then you know you're in for a treat when you hear that tune, because it's time for another episode of the Rec Poker Podcast. Sometimes we hit those audio cues just perfectly, and sometimes we have a little fun around here doing our best. But it's another week in paradise. I've got the best job in the world. I get to hang out here every week and talk to fantastic folks in the rec poker world, in the poker world generally. If you don't know what rec poker is, we're a seriously fun group of amateurs and recreational players who love poker. We love learning about poker. We love getting better at poker together, beating other people at poker, winning all the chips, and just exploring the poker world. So come on over to rec.poker today, get a free account. All it takes is an email address and a smile. I hope you're watching us on YouTube Live. If you are, you get a chance to chat with our guests every week. This week, it's Brad Wilson. I can't wait to get him more involved in the show here. And of course, please click subscribe while you're here. Because that's one of the ways that we keep it going. We're largely volunteer organization here. So I got to thank our sponsors, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and website AMP. And I got to thank all our Wrecking Crew members and premium members, folks like Tron Vidar Stensby, who's one of our international members, who's a stalwart champion of our home games. I think you won one of the heads up home game series that we ran last year. There's another one of those coming up soon. And so Tron Vidar Stensby, thank you so much for your continued support. That $15 a month makes a big difference for us. Because like I say, it's a group effort over here. I'm Jim Reid. I'll be your host this week, but I'm just one of many on the Wrecking Crew. And if you want to find out more about me, you can go to rec.poker/crew, where you can also learn about fantastic folks like Chris and John, who you're about to meet right now.
So I'm Chris Jones. You can find me 5B5 on Twitter or 5x5 on the Poker Stars home game.
And I'm John Somsky. I am Poker Geek MN everywhere.
And I mentioned already, I've got the best job in the world. I'm going to tease a couple things quickly. Rec Poker Weekend is coming up June 24th and 25th. If you can get yourself down to Running Aces in Minnesota, boy, we are going to have a fun time down there. There's a whole tournament series. There's an exclusive tournament just for Rec Poker members. There's going to be some splash prizes. We're going to give out a bunch of gear. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you're already down in Las Vegas getting ready for WSOP, I've got good news for you. On Monday, June 27th at 10 a.m., a bunch of us will be getting together at the WSOP Cafe down at Bally's there to have some fun, hang out, get together, do a little socializing, give out some patches. And that's going to be a lot of fun too. So come and check that out. You can find out more about that by going to rec.poker/road trips. But enough of that. Let's get into the meat of the conversation. I'm so excited to welcome back to the show, Brad Wilson. Brad, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yo, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, we got some podcaster on podcaster crime happening here. We're bringing you on our show. We're going to hear all about your show if our folks don't know it already. In fact, why don't we just start there? I sort of introduced you as a podcast host. You've been an accomplished player. You've been the podcast host for a while. I know you're very involved with coaching and other ways of growing the game. How do you describe yourself within the poker world?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I do lots of things. You know, I started chasing poker greatness maybe 2.5 years ago. I've been a coach at Card Runners. For those of you who remember Card Runners forever ago, as a coach at Run It Once. I also coach at pokercoaching.com, and I've been a professional since 2004. From 2004 until 2019, 2020, whenever the podcast launched, and then I transitioned more into the business coaching, podcasting side of things, the media. And really, my whole life is immersed in poker strategy and teaching, communicating effectively. I have a coaching for profit group that I train on an almost daily basis. And I have crushers who I'm coaching on an almost daily basis as well, who are battling, in the streets of 510 No Limit online. One of my students is Jaywin, who's, grown like a pretty big audience relatively quickly in Texas. I think he had a 50K month last month. So, just fully immersed in the poker space, but I haven't put in a ton of volume. So I can't really call myself much of a player for the past couple of years, more just a strategist and learning and learning how to communicate effectively and coach people. I mean, it's really a different skill set than actually playing cards.
Yeah, you've mentioned sort of learning to communicate effectively a couple times in that description. Yeah. So that's obviously something that's really important to you. Is that strictly in the context of coaching, or what has given that such a primacy in your life right now?
Well, to teach somebody effectively, you need to be able to transfer knowledge. And most of the time with transferring knowledge, you have to meet somebody on their paradigm, right? I think that's the classic coaching mistake of assuming that people think about things in the way that you think about things. But the reality is a poker player, the coach has to get into the head of the student and understand how they see the world, how they see the game, how they think about the game, the language that they use around the game. And then, one thing that I feel like is just underrated in poker education kind of across the board is more robust language where you're able to describe a specific line, a specific action, a specific sizing scheme, a specific board type or turn or river when the equity shifts effectively and quickly. And I think that we've done a pretty horrendous job in general in poker of, creating more robust language where we can all speak and everybody understands exactly what's being said, and there's not anything that's kind of lost in translation, because all of those spots where things are lost in translation, they just mean that the coaching is not as effective, the communication's not as effective, the learning's not going to be as effective, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. So if folks in our YouTube chat have questions, feel free to type away. And of course, Chris and John, anytime you want to jump in. John, do you have something here?
No, sorry. I just
I saw the unmuted and I made a bad assumption. So Brad, I'm always interested in how other people coach. We have a coaching program here that mostly works with beginners and intermediate players, and it just sort of helps them shine a light on their own game. How do you yourself sort of decide what someone should be studying, or what level they're on, or how to take them to the next level? What's the way that you kind of work out with them where they're at?
Well, luckily, over the past few years, I've been very fortunate to have a really strong and tight-knit community. Greatness Village on Slack, there's almost 700 people in there. Everybody's talking, there's hand histories, discussion all the time. And I think the major thing is people will join the community, they'll introduce themselves, they'll talk about where they're at in their journey, and they just ask the community, right? Where should I start? Do you think pre-flop bootcamp is good? Or if somebody reaches out directly, just because I think in general, when, like I said, I've transitioned more to business. And so instead of beating people out of money on the green felt, now in order to sustain the podcast and all the things, you have to sell products, right? So I have products, and I think there's this thing when somebody asks you what you should do, and you're incentivized to sell them, that makes it come across as there's a little bit of trust lost. But when it comes to the community, people answer very honestly about their experience and where they're at, and so that is a really good way of figuring out where you need to go. And in general, the way that I structured my products was I started with pre-flop, since, it is the first street, right? I thought about poker, and poker is a big game. It's a big game tree, right? It's so big, in fact, that we don't even realize we play the same spots again and again and again, because they seem so different, right? It's almost like an infinite number of possibilities, but there is a finite number of possibilities, and a lot of them are quite similar in structure. So the way that I really approached training was I wanted to make it sequential, to where one course leads into the next course and it makes sense and it's not overwhelming, right? Even though you're going to play a flop, right? You got no choice when you sit down to play cards. You're going to see a flop. You'll have to make decisions, right? The classic mistake of poker training, in my opinion, is pure overwhelm. They try to teach everything, and they end up teaching a bunch of things very, very poorly. So for me, I look at poker as a bunch of mini games that make up this giant macro game. And we just, like a car, if you imagine all the different parts of the car, you pull out one piece, you isolate it, you work on that, and then you put it back in the car. And then you find the next spot, right? So like after pre-flop, for me, it was c-betting against fish, because most of the revenue, most of the profit that you generate when you play poker is against the weaker players. So having a good plan on flops for c-betting in position against that specific profile, that was the next product. And then dealing with donk bets. So when you raise pre-flop and you're in position and the villain leads into you, that is another product. And then c-betting on the turn and river after the flop. And basically like sequential of like, this is what you're going to do. It's a spot that happens at a high frequency and it plays an outsized role in your win rate. So these are the things that we need to focus on, prioritize, and do quite well, right? And my goal in the beginning was to build out courses for every spot, right? So like 2-bet pots in position as a pre-flop raiser versus fish, 2-bet pots in position as the pre-flop caller, versus regs versus fish versus whales, like whatever profile, and just map out everything and have like a giant catalog of courses. And as I was, doing this, I kind of just realized like, the one-to-one coaching for me has gotten like, I enjoyed doing it, but it got a little stale in that I love teaching, but I don't think I could plug and play in like the school system in the United States. I couldn't teach the same lesson day after day after day. It just, it doesn't do it for me. It's monotonous. It's boring. I hate it. And I found that I was giving the same coaching sessions again and again and again. And it just felt so inefficient. I was like, like it would cannibalize my business, but I wish I could just record this and just like be like, here, no, let's just watch this video instead of doing the coaching session, right? Because it's going to be the same. So as all these things were kind of happening and I had my plan for the business, I realized like, well, why not just build out everything in the way that I wanted to, but have a coaching for profit group instead that's built more like a team atmosphere where you sign people up, they sign a contract for 2 years, they get access to all the strategies. Every coaching session is recorded and everybody can watch every replay. So I don't have to do the same thing, the same lesson again and again and again. We can have group coaching. We can learn collectively and grow collectively, like iron sharpens iron. And that thought I had maybe a little over a year ago. And then for the past year, I've hunkered down and really built out every single course that I had envisioned for both regs and fish. And now it's a matter of once I built everything out, which took me about 4 or 5 months, then it was the next giant problem of like, oh great, I've mapped out poker. Now I have to transfer all this information to these human beings, right? So creating a learning path that was again robust and that people understood. There's vocabulary cards because again, we need to speak the same language, right? Like when I say you face a flop float, right? Like that can mean a bunch of different things. If you go to Hold'em Manager, like their definition of like a float is, the pre-flop raiser checks and the in position pre-flop caller bets, right? Which is not what people think about when they hear float. They think, oh, I call the flop with, not a good hand so that I can take it away on a future street, right? So it's just very important that like when we say I floated the flop, that everybody's on the same page. And then identifying flop textures by specific type, turn cards by specific type, flush completers, straight completers, overcards, undercards, board pairing. And then, basically breaking apart the game once again, like just breaking apart the game into manageable bite-sized chunks.
Well, I see our YouTube chat's blowing up a bit, so I'm going to get some of those questions here too. I couldn't help. I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Election, but as you're talking about that, all I can think is Matthew Broderick lining up saying, executive, judicial, legislative, the three branches of, he's a civics teacher, and every year he teaches the triangle model of government. And so, okay, judicial, executive, legislative, it's like the same thing over and over again. They get into that there. I think that's exactly what you're talking about. So I'll get to some of these YouTube questions. And if you're in the YouTube chat, folks, stick around till after the interview. We're going to have a contest at the end of the show where you can win a copy of a poker book from Darrow Carney and Barry Carter. So I think Type Login had a question about the vocabulary, which I think you've already answered there. We got a couple, George Argris and Dean C, making some fun comments about your amazing community over there at CPG. Troy Chapman asks, what was the wildest game you've ever played? We'll just jump right in with that one.
The wildest game that I've ever played. I mean, I've played a bunch of wild games. Man, it's a tough question. Yeah,
by characters at the table or by swings at the table, I'd give you either one there. Take your out.
Yeah, I played a home game one time where I was. It was a pot limit Omaha game. I was winning 30K, and I ended up losing 55K.
Okay, that's a big swing.
In the same session, the game started out as 2-5. to give you a sense of how wild things got over the course of the night. And I found out years and years later that I was actually cheated in that game. I was pretty sure that I was, and then had somebody on the podcast who played in the game, like a famous poker player, and we'd only played together a few times, and I was like, you probably don't remember, we battled at that pot limit Omaha game at such and such location. He's like, oh yeah, they cheated us. And I was like, I knew it. What? And then we had a 30-minute discussion about what they did and all of that. So it was that was a pretty wild game. I battled against Bruno Mars over the course of 4 days. I've talked about that quite a bit. That was, I'm not going to say wild. I mean, what was more wild were how people interacted with a pop star. They just act very strange and weird, and it was uncomfortable, quite frankly. People are trying to pass him lyrics to songs and stuff, and it was weird.
So is that not a good way to get your song performed by a pop star? Just to show up next to them and hand them handwritten,
a cocktail napkin, writing down the lyrics on it. Yeah, that's the way. It's the way for him to be yo, I can't look at this. If I sing it, I can't even do it. I'm not gonna even entertain it. I can't even look at it, right? Because if he looks at it and then says something similar one day, he's opened a lawsuit, right? So he's I'm not even looking at that thing. You're out of your mind.
No, good point. I want to take a little segue there because for some of our folks that might not have heard you talking about it in the past, you mentioned getting cheated in that game, and that's obviously in the news right now. I'll give you the choice. Would you rather tell us a little bit about how you got cheated in that game, or if you have some thoughts on the more recent cheating scandals, or both?
I can't remember exactly how they cheated me in that game. It had something to do with the RFID. They were basically able to know who was going to win the hand as the cards were being dealt out, which seat, basically. So that was how that went down. The recent cheating, I mean, you got to be more specific here, Jim.
Yeah.
We got too many scandals all going simultaneously.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, I think a lot of our listeners are live players. So I think we're also removed from the technology online, that I think it's kind of easy to imagine how people could cheat online, because it all kind of happens behind the veil.
Yeah.
But what about in live environments? And what can we do to protect ourselves when we're in those spots?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the problem.
I don't know.
Right?
So that the thing is whenever you get scammed, right? Whenever you're the mark, basically, I learned this the hard way. It's got to seem like a good situation, right? They reel you in through greed, which is what happened to me. It was 4 a.m. We were raising the stakes, and I was playing against four of the worst pot limit Omaha players I've ever seen in my life, and we were five-handed, right? So it was like, yo, I'm gonna have a 6-figure night tonight. Like I'm gonna have a 6-figure night. And so like greed came into play, right? And then like some things didn't go well. I stopped winning pots at Showdown, and it was just like, yeah, whatever. We just keep rolling, right? We just keep battling. And it was only until like afterwards when I collected myself, after playing all night, that I realized like something was weird about that. Like there was one red flag was one of the players. When we started playing, it was 2-5, as I said. One of the players, everybody was button straddling to a quarter. And he was an older gentleman, and he was like, I'm not putting $25 in without looking at my hand, right? I specifically remember that remark because at about 4 a.m, he was button straddling to 500. And I only connected those dots like the next day, because in the moment I just didn't recognize it. It didn't compute. So there were like weird things like that I could have seen, but I mean, I don't. It was 5 a.m. and I'd been playing like all night. So it's hard to, it just is what it is. I think playing in a non-home game environment is honestly maybe the best way to protect yourself. If you think anything shady is happening, then tell the floor. If you're at a casino, tell somebody who's in charge. They did the whole thing in Texas about the shufflers. Joey Ingram did an expose or whatever. And interestingly, one of my Coaching for Profit guys actually plays in that room, and he was telling me about it. So I could have scooped Joey like a month in advance because he was telling me. But even then, there was very little details as to if they were cheating, how were they doing it? They had almost no proof, almost no details. Mm-hmm. And to my knowledge, that couple that was being accused ended up dumping $60K back and over a few days, doing the same stuff. So they could have just been on a heater, right? I think panic gets to people. It's really hard to know. As far as online though, I think poker sites are highly incentivized to crack down on cheating. So they do a lot of things. And also this is, I don't know how to say this in a way. I don't want to come off as arrogant, but the reality is if you have two people that are telling each other their cards and playing in the same room or near each other, my experience is that they're just not very good at poker. You can beat them just by playing cards well, because the folks that generally, in a general sense, that want to cheat, are trying to gain an edge that they don't have.
That's a great point. Yep.
So I think in that sense, you don't have to be super concerned that you control the controllables, which is your ability to make good decisions when you're playing poker. But yeah, I mean, cheating, I think whenever you have a game where you're playing for thousands and thousands of dollars and cheating, there's almost no downside to cheating. In an online unregulated sense, right? You get your account confiscated, but you don't go to jail. You can't lose your job. There's high profile allegations floating around. Those guys still have a job. They can still show up and they're still battling, in the biggest and most prestigious tournaments in the world. So the downside just isn't there right now. And that's just unfortunate. It's just I think that somehow got to figure out a way to create some downside. I think prison would be the biggest deterrent, right? You get fined, you go to jail for basically stealing from people. But then the second deterrent would just be you lose your job. You lose your ability to get in action anywhere. But that's a slippery slope that, I don't want to be the judge, jury, and executioner of such a thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a difficult thing to be the decider for, and are we going to have open court cases where we decide definitively who's cheated and who hasn't, and what will the consequences be? But I think you're right. There have to be some consequences, or else bad actors are going to act badly. That's humans going to human, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it just from the poker player sense of, yeah, there are going to be bad actors, but oh my God, I would hate to be accused of something that I didn't do and just not be able to play anymore, right? And have my reputation ruined. So like you need irrefutable evidence that you just cannot dispute. And then even then, right, it's like there are lots of famous professionals who have been given a pass over the years because they did something really dumb when they were 21 years old. And that was 15 years ago, right? And I think we can all, well, at least I hope we can all empathize with being 21 and doing really dumb shit because I did my fair share, you know? So,
sure.
Yeah, we just need penalties, and I don't know what they are. And I, had an opportunity to maybe be involved in something that was arbitrating these cases and really just quickly realized like, this is, I don't, it's too much responsibility for me and everybody's going to hate me. Nobody likes the poker police. So yeah,
yes, it's a no-win for you. There's no good outcome for you in that scenario, right? It's a no-win scenario.
No, you just need to like build me a golden cage and pay me millions of dollars a year to do it. And I'll just accept that I have no friends in poker anymore. Like, okay, you guys hate me. That's all right. I'll make friends doing something else. I guess I'll get into Magic the Gathering. I don't know.
Nice. Yeah, Chris, jump in.
Well, and I kind of want to take the opposite. I mean, besides cheating, which obviously gives you an edge, but like, you know, one of the things that I think you do with your podcast is you talk to some of the, you know, the people at the highest level of the game where there have been some cheating scandals. But I want to kind of move on from cheating and talk about
good,
like, yeah, right. Talk about those other edges. Like when I see, you know, like the World Series of Poker Go will be playing like World Series of Poker. It's the 100K, you know, bracelet event, and I see the people around the table, and I'm like, where is the edge here? How does anybody have an edge over anybody else? Because they're all so good. Do you have, I mean, after doing all of this sort of, you know, your whole podcast is called Chasing Poker Greatness. Do you have a sense of that? Do you have an answer? Like when you're sitting with 6 of the best players at the world at a table, where do you find an edge?
Well, I read an article, I can't remember where it was, like a few months back, about how those guys on the high roller circuit watch every single high roller tournament. They watch Cards Up because they have the feeds, right? Everybody has access to the feeds afterwards. So every single one of them watch game tape of every single tournament, right? So to me, I don't know that necessarily it's about edge. I think more it's about prestige. I do think there is edge, right? I can't remember who it was on the podcast, but they were telling me a story of like, you know, some billionaire who had a girlfriend in Europe and she had never played poker before. And he just like gave her 100K and was like, play this high roller event, right? And she just buys it. So like, you know, there are these people that sign up to these tournaments that do generate an edge for everybody, because the thing is the rake is very small when you have a 100K tournament. So like you don't need, and the fields are really small. So you have a 30-person field, you add in one whale. Well, it just that everybody just chops up that whale's money basically. Like they just, that's where the edge comes from. But I think that like at the pinnacle of excellence, I think these guys they're chasing poker greatness, right? Like they're chasing the prestige. They're chasing whatever it means to be the best poker player that they can possibly be. And the only way to chase that in earnest is to play against people that are going to push you, that are going to make you evolve. They're going to make you grow. And, you know, when you're, you know, Jason Kuhn, well, the only way to find that is by battling it out against the other high rollers and really investing yourself into the strategy and learning and growing and improving. And there's also side benefits to playing against the best players in the world, because like when you go down a notch, right? Like you're playing against guys you have significant edges against. So you're not only playing against these guys with, you know, probably a small edge, you also get to shift gears and then have a giant edge against everybody else you play in all the other tournaments. So it's not only for prestige, but to me, it's also for training and growth in their poker career.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that. We've got a question from Evil Roy Slade here in the chat. Any tips or starting points for a poker coaching member who is a longtime passive content consumer who is very bad at getting going with more serious studying? So is that a question of like motivation or aligning your study plan?
I would say I would question the drivers really first and foremost. Like we think that as humans we're good at being we think self-discipline is like a good thing, that we're good at it. We can just grow and build and we can have self-discipline. But like, the data says very differently that we need outside forces to drive behavior. And if you just imagine it like the gym metaphor of like, okay, I'm going to change everything. It's January 1st. I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go nuts, right? And by day 3, you're like, fuck the gym. Fuck 6 a.m. I am done. I'm not doing this. But now imagine that you have accountability, right? Imagine that you have somebody that's in it with you, that's in the trenches, a friend, right? Like Jim, if you and Chris agree that you're going to meet up at this place at 7 a.m., well, you're going to show up at 7 a.m. because you don't want to let the other person down, right? So I would put in natural things that drive you to take the action that you want to take. Get somebody who's also a poker coaching member and have a study session at like 7 p.m. based on this thing and show up, right? Like you have to put pieces in place that drive you to take the action that you want to take. And obviously self-discipline. And this is not a knock on, what is it? Evil Roy Slade.
Evil Roy.
Yeah. Evil Roy. This is not a knock on you, Evil Roy, because my self-discipline is terrible too. So like, I think just as humans, we're not very good at it. Another thing that really helps me, that's a very simple thing. I have a journal and I write out my day the day before. So what I'm going to work on, what my plan is. And magically, whenever I write these things down in my journal, they just have a habit of getting done.
Yes.
They just somehow the boxes get checked. And when I don't write anything in there, well, I end up just walking around in circles all day with just like a chicken with my head cut off with no plan. So like creating a plan for your day, I think is also a pretty important thing.
It's that sense of accountability is what I'm hearing. And, at the least some accountability to yourself, having a list and a plan that you're kind of letting yourself down if you don't follow through with it. And then having accountability to other people that you don't want to let them down. That's been helpful for me personally. When I've had like a workout buddy, that was basically the only time I ever actually got to the gym. So that makes perfect sense to me. And I think like for us here at Rec Poker too, a lot of our wrecking crew members, I think they wouldn't be making the strides that they're making if they weren't feeling accountable to the members that show up to their study group every week or every month or whenever they do it. Like I know Kim does her hand history review every month. And if there wasn't people counting on her to come and do that study group, she probably wouldn't prepare the material as well or wouldn't feel accountable to it. So I think we're really talking about the same thing. We talk about community and learning together and counting on each other. That seems like it's crucial.
I think it's just the alternative, right, is to question your own values. And as it relates to poker, do you value being a strong poker player? Do you value studying? Do you value the strategy? And if you don't, if that's not a driver, then just don't study. Play poker as a hobby for fun, right?
Yes.
And just don't care about getting better.
Yes.
Or if you want to win, but you don't want to study, then find a new hobby, right? Those are the alternatives, I think.
Yeah. Well, know what you want, right? Like know what actually drives you. Because I think we have all these things that like we want to be a very skilled poker player, but we're not willing to really put in the time or effort to do it. We just want kind of all the upside. But
it goes back to language, right, Jim?
Mm-hmm.
Like put language to your values. What is it that drives you as a human, right? When I did a value exercise a few years back as it related to my business, my driver was impact. I want to make an impact. Like this gets me out of bed in the morning, making an impact on the people in my community, on my students, on the people I interact with, on their poker games. like tangible improvement. It gets me going. So like I use that as a driver for all the things that I do. Like I want to make an impact. Is this going to make an impact? If it's not going to make an impact, then I just outsource it or don't do it.
Right.
But just this week, right? Speaking of like accountability, homework, community, all these things, my Wolves, which is my CFP program.
That's great.
My Wolves this week, they filled out an accountability worksheet or not an accountability, a values worksheet. And we're going to go over everybody's values at group coaching next week, collectively. Right. And this is, again, we understand each other, where we're coming from, what matters based on these words, right? Trust, freedom, just like all of these different things that individuals can value. And it's just really important to know where people are coming from, to know what matters to them, and know what's going to get them going.
Well, speaking of getting them going, I can't believe we're already like 35 minutes into the time that we said we'd take with you. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then I don't want to keep you here all night. Well, actually I do, but I understand that we live in the real world here. So when you're coaching with a series of different players from different starting points. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about some common errors that recreational players, and when I say recreational players, I don't mean beginners. I just mean players that aren't doing it for a living, but they're climbing the ladder. So what are sort of some common areas that there's some low-hanging fruit for the less experienced players that maybe they could just chop out of their game right now, bring that C game up a little?
Oh man. It's
too many to choose from.
Sounds like a simple question. It sounds like a simple question, right? But yeah, I don't think it's like there's a super simple answer here. I think that the major thing that most people get wrong is as humans, I think we've been taught, it's been beat into us to be outcome based. And we focus on the outcome of an individual hand, right? Like if you find yourself asking, was there any way that I could have folded this hand? And it's some like giant hero fold, right? It's like you're saying, I did everything right? You can do everything right and lose. And that's what's supposed to happen in this game. So like when you find yourself saying like, could I have folded this anywhere, right? You're focusing on the outcome when that's just done. It doesn't matter. First of all, it's over. You can't erase it. And like if it's a spot that's cut and dry, you should always go broke there, right? Like there's good ways to go broke. There's bad ways to go broke. And if you go broke in a good way, you just rebuy and play the next hand. You just rebuy and just keep going. So I think like avoiding that trap of trying to avoid pain and just really focus on the result of a singular hand and think more about the strategy, right? I think think really in depth about what poker is as a game, and the strategy behind why things are going on. Upgrade your language. This is like a major one. Just be able to know that like, it sounds like a simple thing, but if I'm going to, well, all right, there are exceptions to this because I've coached a number of dyslexic students who get tripped up with words, right? Yep. Which is a different thing than what I'm talking about here, by the way, because they understand, they see the patterns, they know what's going on. Their descriptive language just gets stuck. But if you're not dyslexic and, it's like a 2-bet pot or a 3-bet pot or a 4-bet pot, right? At first you bet and then you raise. The first bet is the blind, right? Always. That's why, the raise first in is a 2-bet. And that's why when you 2-bet and somebody re-raises you, it's a 3-bet, right? So just knowing how to talk about these things, and like we take it for such granted, right? Like whenever the first 9 people, we'll call them cavemen, I don't know who they were, that played poker and sat around in a semicircle, right? They had their rocks and I don't know.
Yeah. But I'm right there with you for sure.
The first 9 people who sat down to play poker, right? There was no under the gun. There was no cutoff. There was no middle position. There was no hijack. There was no low jack. these terms didn't exist, these ways to describe the positions. So this is language, right? That anchors you. And I raised from the cutoff, right? That signifies there's a range of hands you should be raising from the cutoff here. And everybody understands this, right? And then for some reason, after pre-flop, we get to the flop and language just falls apart. We do a very poor job of describing the action as it's happening, describing the sizing scheme. And yeah, I think that's something that I would focus a lot of energy on. As a matter of fact, that's something that I focus in the Wolf program on a regular basis, is trying to figure out ways to upgrade language so that we can communicate more effectively amongst ourselves. I don't care if nobody else outside of Wolves can understand us, as long as we can understand what we're saying to each other. And one phrasing that I'm trying to get caught on is hatching, right? Which basically, like, when a straight is completed on the turn, or when a flush is completed on the turn, or boats are completed, the board pairs on the turn of the river, just like a straight hatches, right? Like Jack 10 hatches. We just need some way to and also to shorten what we're saying too. When it takes 3 sentences to describe something that happens, that's so inefficient. We just need much better words to be able to talk about this stuff, so we can have this knowledge, right? It's like we have a word for the button, then we have this knowledge for how to play the button, facing an under the gun open, facing a cutoff open, facing a hijack open, facing a small blind 3-bet, right? All this is anchored in that one word. So we need to expand that and add more words so that we can chunk in a lot of complex information and build from there.
That's a great answer. We've got a couple more questions here in the chat, and then we'll get you on out of here, Brad. This has been a lot of fun so far. One from George. Do you think small winning players need more upgrades to their tactical understanding or to their mental game? Tactical. Yeah.
You get both at the same time. It's a 2-for-1 deal. So you are trying to upgrade your tactical, and while you're upgrading your tactical, well, you're going to have to deal with the mental game of poker at the same time. So, I mean, you just focus on the tactical, focus on making good decisions. And I think that once you're able to make good tactical decisions and you're able to have a strong thought process in the way that you think about making decisions, then the next step is most likely going to be something in the mental game side. But the mental game is consistent, goes forever, doesn't matter your skill level, doesn't matter who you are. There's no way to switch off your emotions. You're never just cured of mental game. It's always a thing. And so, really, you have to embrace and accept that this feeling of awfulness, this creeping suspicion that maybe you're a losing player, maybe everybody caught up to you overnight, maybe you never knew what was going on and you just got really lucky for 15 years straight. It never goes away. You feel it all the time, every single month, every single week. You always have that doubt. But to me, that doubt is something that I think is an asset, because it pushes you. It pushed me, right? It's like, if I think everybody's catching up, well, I need to bear down. I've got to be stronger. If everybody else would give up, if they went through this run that I went through, well, guess what? I'm not everybody else. I'm going to make it through, right? So, again, adversity, like we talked about before with the high roller crew, adversity can sharpen you. Adversity can make you stronger. And so learning that it's okay to feel terrible. It's okay to have to weather adversity. It makes me stronger at the end of the day. I think that's just sort of got to be your motto, especially in this game.
I love it. Well, you're obviously a very exciting guest, Brad, because we're getting too many questions, I think, to get them all into the episode. We'll just have to have you back one time soon, and we can get to some of these other ones. I see the Post Oak Bluff. I do remember the Post Oak Bluff. Yeah, that one sounds like. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That sounds like an interesting story.
It's Doyle. It goes back to Super System, and it's like a very small bet as a bluff. And I think in today's lingo, we would call it, probably an induction bet or a blocker bet.
Yep,
would be what a Post Oak Bluff is.
All right, there you go. I got one. I can't not ask this question from Type Login about language. So there's only one John Somsky in the world, and he's on the show right now. Have you ever heard, Brad, of the Somsky ratio as an expression? No. So the Somsky ratio is the ratio of the shortest stack at the final table to the tallest stack at the final table. So the bigger the disparity, the greater the ratio. Can you think of any strategic benefit to knowing if there was a larger or smaller Somsky ratio at any given table? Like you'd think that the bigger the disparity, the more, big stack dynamic, short stack dynamic would come into play.
I mean, you would think that at like high leverage moments at like a final table, ICM considerations would be in play, where like the bigger the ratio, the tighter the middling or smaller stacks probably need to play, and the looser the big stacks need to play.
So there you go, John. That's an official weighing in on the strategic value of the Somsky ratio, because I'm making that a thing. We're making the Somsky ratio a thing. So I'm just glad to have you on board officially with that, Brad.
I'm on board.
All right.
I mentioned it once like a year ago, and he'll never let me forget it.
It's such a fun thing. I love it.
That's the thing about language, I tried making the wolves come up with language and stuff, and they're like my kids when you tell them to eat broccoli. Like whatever, Dad. Go. I'm gonna eat this ice cream instead. They were not into it, right? So it's all on me. But when you do come up with language that just nails a situation perfectly and describes it, it's the best feeling. It's like, holy shit, we just reduced 8 words into one, and it makes perfect sense, and everybody's clear.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me that gets excited about something.
No, it's not. That's how I felt when I first heard John talk about the ratio like that. I was like, oh man, we have discovered something really fantastic here. We got to make this a thing. Well, thank you, Brad. So Martha says, such an intuitive thinker, Brad. That's nice of Martha to chip in. We've got a few other comments in the chat here. I'll just say, folks, if you want to come back, we'll have Brad on again sometime soon. And of course, you got to go check out Chasing Poker Greatness. Brad, where is the best place for folks to go if they want to connect with you further? Twitter, email, download the podcast. What's your preferred way?
Yeah, I would just hit the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast if you haven't listened to it. And then from there, greatnessvillage.com, hop in the Slack community. Lively discussions. We keep, as somebody mentioned in the chat, the toxicity to pretty much non-existent. Mm-hmm. My old second in command, Coach Thomas, he's the nicest cat-loving human that you'll ever meet. Soft-spoken, very nice, very gracious. If somebody starts posting a bad beat story, he turns into Terminator Thomas and just lays the smack down. It's uncomfortably brutal. When I read some of his smackdowns, it's like, hey, we don't do this. Find a different coping mechanism. Like this, this is like the exact words. Like we don't just like wallow in our bad beats here. Find a different coping mechanism. I was like, damn, Terminator got him again. But yeah, I think that the reality is like anything that you've experienced in poker, everybody else has experienced it too. So like you think that you're going through something that's like unique to you, you're really not. Like we're all taking bad beats on a daily basis. We don't need to broadcast them. We don't need to talk about them. They happen to all of us, and we're all barely holding it together by a thread, right? And as soon as you let that negativity come in, it's like an avalanche, and everybody just falls completely apart. And that was, something that I learned quite quickly in my old Skype group for my students when I was running Enhance Your Edge. When the toxicity gets in there, it's hard to get it out, and there are people that just bring everybody down and makes you feel sad to even read posts, gives you a sick feeling in your stomach, and like, yeah, we don't need that. Like you can go join a different chat group, you can join a different community and tell your bad beat stories if that's what you want to do, but that's not what we do over in Greatness Village.
Nice. That's great to hear it. And yeah, if you're listening at home, bad beat stories, they're just the worst. No one wants to hear them. I know it feels good to tell them, but like find someone who does not know anything about poker and tell them your bad beat stories. Tell people that are not involved in your poker world your bad beat stories, because they might actually enjoy the experience and you get the full catharsis. But the rest of us, it is very painful. Chris?
My experience, the best part about those people is that they don't care either, right? 'Cause they're just like, yeah. You lost with what? I don't. Yeah. So really, nobody cares, right? Like if they're outside poker, they don't really even understand. If they're inside poker, they're like, yeah, it happens to everybody.
And I do want to say, like, that isn't to say that there aren't learning opportunities in hands that you lose or big spots where things go wrong, right? So it's more of a focus on learning and what can we extract from what happened here than just being like, I got an aces pre-flop and I lost. Well, who cares? Like, whatever. That happens all the time. There's no question here. You're just complaining.
That's the key, because I think when making mistakes is a wonderful opportunity to learn and to get better. So you should be talking about hands that you lose or errors that you make. But when you're just complaining, that's different, and that's not constructive or helpful, and it doesn't forward the conversation at all. So
you should be talking about hands that you win, right? Like you should be wondering if you make mistakes in hands that you win, because again, like poker is not the feedback mechanism is distorted. So like what the results are telling you is not the truth of the situation. So like everything is up for analysis, and like most people they win a pot. They don't really think about it because, human beings, we have a negativity bias. We gravitate towards the negative instead of the positive when we win the pots. But I think to really be to really realize your full potential as a poker player, you need to think about, did I maximize value here? When you make a river bet with a strong hand and they fold, like, did you size correctly? Should you have gone bigger? Should you have gone smaller? Should you have induced? What line did you take? So even when you win money, you need, or win the pot, you still need to analyze what happened. And I think lots of folks fall into the trap of just trying to focus on the pots that they lose when, I've played a billion pots and I've made a billion mistakes. And a lot of those mistakes have been in not maximizing value, or not using the most optimal size that I could use in a situation, going 90% on the river instead of 150, when 150 would have gotten called at the same frequency as 90. You're just leaving that money on the table, right?
Yep.
So really what I'm getting at here is that to be a professional poker player, to be a high level poker player, you just need to be miserable all the time. When you lose pots, you're miserable, and when you win pots, you're miserable. So everything is miserable all the time.
I love it. Well, this has not been a miserable 55 minutes or so. So thank you so much for your generous time, Brad. Folks, go check him out. Chasing Poker Greatness. If you haven't heard it already, it's available anywhere excellent podcasts are sold. So go download it today. And if you're going to stick around in the chat here, if you want to join our contest, just type the word contest in the chat here in the YouTube channel. And while we get into our home game stuff, we'll do our draw for that. Brad, thank you again. That was real kind of you. And I learned a couple of things today, and I can't wait to see what our listeners have to say. So I look forward to talking again real soon.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm going to go lie down. I went to the World Series of Poker for a week and made it one day, got COVID, and stared out of my hotel room window like Pablo Escobar in Narcos for the next 6 days straight.
Damn it.
So yeah, I've had better experiences. I left to go to Vegas for like one time in the last 2 years and snap get COVID. So yeah, I'm gonna go lay down, maybe take some medication.
Yep. You rest up, and we'll have you on again real soon, I hope, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface of some great conversations here, Brad. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Y'all take care. Have a good night.
All right. Well, that was Brad Wilson from Chasing Poker Greatness. We've got a bunch of, we're going to cover some home game results and some fun activities coming up. But like I say, if you're in YouTube right now, type the word contest into the chat and we will do a draw. The winner gets a copy of Dara O'Carney and Barry Carter's book, Endgame Poker Strategy, the ICM book, which is a great read. And it's what we're currently reviewing in our book study here at Rec Poker with Rob Washam, who couldn't join us tonight. But yeah, that's that. So John, why don't you take us into home game results, and we can talk about some community happenings here at Rec Poker while people type contest into the chat.
That sounds good. Well, first and foremost, we had our Mixed Game Championship Series on June 8th, and B-Chip Charles Allen won his first Mixed Game Championship Series.
Nicely done, Charles.
Then we move on to the daily series nightly events, and on June 6th, B-Chip Charles Allen got his third nightly victory for the year.
What? Oh my God.
Yep. Repeat players. We got a couple of those this week. Then Elvis 76, Steve Krebs got his third nightly victory for the year. Salix 7779, Stefan Vermelion got his first nightly victory for the year. Stewie 13, Stuart Karich got his fourth.
All right.
Yes, he is. And Poker Geek MN John Somsky got his fourth for the year.
No kidding. They're letting anybody win them these days.
They are. It just proves anyone can win them right there.
Congratulations, John. Nicely done.
And the only reason I won that was I just folded every time I got pocket fives. That felt great. Then Elvis 76, Steve Krebs came back and won again his second international event for the year. Wow. Apple O' My Eye, Harold Berry got his second international. Oh, and there should have been a mixed practice event, but I forgot to schedule it until about 15 minutes before the game. So we didn't get enough players to actually have that one go. But it'll be there next week now. So we'll be ready for some more action there. And then on June 12th, Monkey System, Keith Brandt won the Learn Pro Poker event. So he can contact Jim at rec.poker to get his free month at Learn Pro Poker.
That's amazing. Keith is such a great member of the Wrecking Crew here. He does his monthly study group with his off-table tools, and he's going to love that first month of free content at Learn Pro Poker. And anyone else, listen, these home games are free to play in. Every Sunday night, we give away a free month at Learn Pro Poker to the winner. So get in there, earn yourself a free month at Learn Pro Poker, because the kind of material that Ryan LaPlante and the gang over there put together, they've got a huge archive of videos. There's one-on-one stuff with Ryan. It's really impressive. And if you enjoy that kind of learning material, your $15 a month here at Rec Poker for our premium membership gets you behind the scenes access to Learn Pro Poker, Solve for Why, Red Chip, PokerCoaching.com, the Poker Forge, and there's a ton of these premium training sites that know how important recreational players are to the game. So they give us access to some of their material every month so that we can learn along with them. And hopefully some of our members will fall in love with a coach or find someone whose teaching style really speaks to them, and they can find someone to go and take that next level with them. But come and join our premium membership for $15 a month and get a little taster's choice of all the different kinds of excellent poker coaching out there, like Brad's. So, all right, let me see. Why don't we do the contest here? We're just going to roll a die. I see a couple people already have the Dara O'Carney book. No surprise there. So let me just see. We're going to start. Let me just take a look through the chat here. Eric's already got his. Looks like Joe's already got his. All right. So Dean and Dave's already got his. So Dean, Chuck, Joe. Looks like 3. Okay. Well, we got a short list this week. Here's the roll. We're going to start with Dean and work our way down. It's Dean. Okay. Dean C., you have won an electronic version of Endgame Poker Strategy. So to claim your prize, my friend, please email me, jim@rec.poker, and I'll make sure you're all set up so you can learn about ICM and the best way to crush that end of tournament phase, which is so important. That's where all the big decisions get made. And I think having read it and going through it with the book study, there's some eye-openers in there about how ICM can be an important factor even earlier in the tournament than people might expect. So that's all part of your Rec Poker Premium membership as well. So if folks want to go check that out, they can. Use code RECPOKER, get your first month for only $5 bones. I know you like the sound of that. So let me see. Yeah, you said it, Dan. I'm excited too. Or Dean. Sorry, Dean. So yes, we teased it at the top of the show. We've got Running Aces coming up, Rec Poker Weekend on June 24th and 25th. I'm not that good at poker, and I'm a bounty prize in a couple of these tournaments. So it's really going to be pretty simple to show up, knock me out, take some money, go on your way. And it's also going to be a ton of fun. There's a special bounty tournament. We're doing a point race for the player of the series who's going to win a bunch of prizes. We're even doing a sort of social activity. We'll do a meal if we can get some space available outside so we can all enjoy some food without our masks on. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then, like I said, if you're in Vegas on June 22nd, come down to Bally's. We'll be at the WSOP Cafe at the Bally's facility at 10 a.m. on Monday, June 27th. A bunch of folks are down there for the seniors event, the tag team event. There's some other fun stuff going on that week. So that's a great chance to get together. And I think we're going to have some guests come by that day as well if they're in town. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I hope we get a chance to do that. All right. What else? John, the Heads Up match is coming up on June 18th at 1 Central. Is that correct? I think.
Correct. But I believe by the time you are listening to this, it will have already taken place.
Actually, we tweaked the release schedule. So this is now coming out on Friday. So if you're listening to this the day it comes out, you have time. It's not too late to register. It's tomorrow.
And make sure you register on time because there is no late entry.
Yes.
So 1 p.m. on the dot. You have to be pre-registered.
That's right. And you can register a little in advance. So obviously feel free to show up 15 minutes or a half hour earlier and make sure you are registered because, again, there is no late registration. But it is a fun format. It's a heads up ladder tournament playing against other Rec Poker members. You don't have to be a premium member. It's free to enter. And the winner, we do this every quarter, and the winner gets a seat in Marek Madness next March, where we'll have our bracket playoff system. With a bunch of different members and premium members or wrecking crew. And that's a lot of fun too. So join us on Saturday, June 18th for that. And Dean says, does Rec Poker do online home games? Does Rec Poker do online home games? Dean, you're talking to John Somsky here. When John started as the online home game director here at Rec Poker, we had one monthly No Limit Hold'em tournament. And we thought, boy, this is fun. We'll have one monthly No Limit Hold'em tournament for all our members to come in and join. And then we said, well, people want to play some mixed games. Why don't we double the number of poker tournaments that we run every month and also have a monthly mixed game? And John was like, okay, that does sound fun. John likes mixed games, so he was on board. And then this crazy COVID thing happened, and we got the sense that people wanted to sort of connect from home a little more than they'd be used to doing. And so I think, John, you might have even come in and said, like, why don't we just do this every day? I'm going to pretend it was you. It's a better story if you brought that on yourself, to be honest with you, because oh no, for some reason we've lost John's audio. He's not muted in Zoom, so it must be a connection issue or something. No, now he is muted in Zoom. We call this the Somsky, folks. It might be. It must be a button on the.
This is a special
headset.
Somsky.
Yeah, you don't get this very often.
This is the never before seen Somsky.
Yeah, we're taking this deep, John. I'll talk a little bit about your experiences in this area in case you can't come back and join us. But yeah, so then ultimately, to make a long story short, Dean, we ended up now we're playing 10 home games every week. 10 home games every week, plus the monthly Tournament of Champions. So there's usually like 45 home games every month. So Dean, we'd love for you, if you go to rec.poker/home game, you can see the instructions on how to join. It's free. It's widely considered to be the toughest play money home game out there. Certainly the toughest regularly occurring play money home game.
I'll just say, like, I've never ever played in a play money home game where everyone takes it seriously.
Yep.
And so it's a great training tool. You can get hand histories, you can talk about them with friends, and people actually play and try to win. So it's not like an all-in fest. It's not just it's pretty cool.
It is great. And we do give out prizes. We give out the LPP monthly prize on Sundays. But every other night of the week, you are competing for this beautiful bronze rec poker pin. They are elusive. They are in demand. We don't just give them away. You got to win them. And if you win a bronze pin by winning one of our daily tournaments, you're invited back to next month's Tournament of Champions, which is a monthly tournament that we run, the winner of which gets that beautiful silver pin, very coveted. And that's going to unlock some future rewards that we'll talk about down the road a little bit. But it's a lot of fun. Also, if you make the final table of the Tournament of Champions every month, we give you a free month of Rec Poker Premium membership, and you get to come join the panel for our online review and hang. Every month, we take the video of the final table of the Tournament of Champions, and we review it and break it down hand by hand and street by street with the players. So we talk about their strategic decisions, the spots that they faced, what they could have done differently, and it's a chance for our members to get some immediate feedback on their game when it matters, because there's only one pin. So it matters. I get a little. The adrenaline starts pumping when we get close to that silver pin. Now let me see what's up here. See if we can get John Somsky back in the room. So Dean, we do. And how do we calculate the Somsky ratio online? Yeah, it's actually very simple. So email me, jim@rec.poker, and I'll send you the primer on the Somsky ratio and how we calculate it. I love it. And yeah, Dean, that's so lovely to hear you say. It sounds like a community I'm interested in joining. Boy, did we pay this Dean guy to show up and say nice things about us on the show here? I don't, Dean, yeah, please do. Just head on over to www.rec.poker. It's free. All it takes is an email address and a smile, although they're both mandatory. So come on over and get involved. We have forums.
We've got a Discord channel. We've got lots of ways to get involved.
Yeah, amen. The home games, and we have our learning sessions 5 or 6 days a week. There's at least one interactive Zoom strategy session, hand history reviews, poker tracker breakdowns, using Flopzilla, getting involved with solvers. It's we do a lot of things to experience poker learning in as many different ways as we can in community, just like Brad was talking about. We do it all together. We share our victories, we share our losses, we celebrate, we commiserate, and we do it all for free over at rec.poker. So I do hope you come and join us. Well, what do you think, folks? I think we've done a pretty good job. We got John totally KO'd here. So I think we found a whole new
time. It must be
a whole
time to
new
wrap things up. Yeah.
horizon for Somskying. We got the Somsky ratio out there in real legitimate poker speak. So I guess I just want to take an opportunity to thank our sponsors, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. And look at all these amazing people in the chat. Troy, George, Dean, Joe, I already said George, Evil Roy, another Joe. Hold on a second here. Martha, Eric. Let me see. We got a couple more in here. I can tell already. Eric, George. Okay, Chuck. Okay, well, thank you all. And John and Chris and you, the listeners.